Hell, welcome to Dark Matter Radio. This is your host, Ronnie McLean. Tonight, we're going to indulge ourselves into the infinite universe. We're going to see what's out there. We're going to open up our minds. I'm going to ask you to open up your hearts and keep an open mind. For the information that you hear may just shock your mind. Now, this is a show that we did back in 2016 with my good friend Kerry Davis. So let's check it out. Also, go to Live 365 Dark Matter Radio. First, a word from our sponsor.
Without a shadow of a doubt that the so-called African American didn't find his way to America locked at the trunk of a ship. I'm your host, Buck Wylam, and tonight, genocide, violations of human rights, violations of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. These are the things that will be talked about tonight, and how does it affect the people who call themselves African Americans? How does it affect them? Do they even think that they're human? Do they even think that they have human rights? I know in America, all we talk about and sing about and dance about and march about is civil rights. How is that going? Joining me as always, as he should, is my co-host, Rick Moon. Rick, what's going on, brother?
Hey, ain't nothing, Buck. How's everybody doing out there? We're going to have an interesting conversation tonight, and I hope everybody pay very close attention because I think we're in for a good one tonight.
For those who are online and who have having that background noise going, could you cut the background noise, please, so you can hear our guest tonight? Joining us tonight is Roddy McLean. He's a human rights advocate. Looking at over the landscape and seeing what's going on with the African Americans now is not pretty cool. You have your children, mothers being shot with their 5-year-old children in their arms. You have police blowing us away, and we really don't say nothing about it. We do the regular rabble-rousing, but we don't organize ourselves in such a manner to make real positive change. Tonight we're going to talk about that. Could you please cut the noise in the background? Thank you. Thank you very much. We're also going to learn some history, too, about why these things go on. So if you have any questions or you want to join the conversation, please give us a call at 657-383-0630. Ronnie McLean, welcome to African Americans Ain't Africans.
Welcome. How are you today? I'm glad to be here. And I am extremely excited to be a part of your show tonight. And I'd also like to say thank you for having me along with your co-host.
Oh man, you know the way I'm looking at it, man, it's we could be doing a lot better than we're doing. Our children are in the streets rioting and wanting change that should have been brought forth 30, 40, 50 years ago. But all we got was a lot of lip service. And so now the situation has snowballed into where we're at today. So I'm very happy for you to join us and give us your ideas and tell us what you're doing about these human rights violations that's going on. So could you tell the African American Ain't African audience a little bit about yourself and why you decide to take on such a huge undertaking?
First, yep, my name is Ronnie McLean. I'm originally from Long Island, New York. Grew up in the New York area, Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, Bronx, Hempstead, which at one time was the largest minority village in the United States with over 90,000 inhabitants there that were all what you would call African American or black, so-called, and we'll get into a great deal of that tonight. I have my degree from Adelphi University in political studies. I started my degree in education, and I stopped that after my first wife passed away, some about almost 10 years ago now. So I also am a ordained minister. I have a degree in ministry as well, religious studies, and I was a pastor of a church. I also was into the protective services for New York City for over 10 years. I also did foster care and also did daycare licensing. I did the same thing down in the state of Florida as well before I got into the business of running housing authorities. And that was a whole nother ball game that taught me a lot of things as well. So I've been in and out of over 10,000 homes and interviewed over 20,000 people. And throughout my career, I got a chance to see almost every demographic that's a part of this country, even those you would call the legal name and legal definition by this corporation of the United States of Indians, or quote-unquote Aboriginals, which we'll get into that as well. So I also started a group called the United Front Line. Didn't have any other pseudonym after that until just a few months ago, after I got finished studying what we are now getting ready to talk about and why we are in the situation that we're in, which is the truth of the history of the indigenous being that was first on this land before 1492, before the Europeans, or so-called Europeans, came over here and began their war against the indigenous people of the Americas. And the Americas ranged all the way from Alaska, all the way down through what you would call Central America, all the way down to the hills of Peru, all the way into Antarctica. And so as I've been studying this, and as I got into this, you know, my basic formation with everything was about us coming from Africa, was us studying the religion of what the Europeans have given us in terms of Jesus Christ, and the Atlantic slave trade. And there were a lot of questions. I was getting ready to do this 10 years ago. I'm getting ready to do probably, in September, which is something that's been talked about, and even introduced once in, I think it was in 1958, but got absolutely no traction whatsoever, supposedly because of the Cold War, and that is putting a petition into the United Nations. And that petition at that particular time was genocide, put in through the African American Congress, I believe it was, or Negro Congress at that point. Back in the 50s and 40s, people really didn't identify themselves with that term African American or even black until up into the 60s, and then afterwards. So that's just a little bit about myself and how I got into this, and a bit of an awakening that took place when I began to start realizing that something was terribly amiss in our education system and the things that I was being taught. Now, we're all probably around the same age, and if you were taught like I was taught, you know, you guys, some people are from California, which is a very strong indigenous state that had a lot of confederations of dark-skinned, true indigenous people over there that fought strong and hard for their freedoms. But if you were taught the education that I was taught back in elementary school, you were given a history book. And in that history book was probably 99% all European, or 99.9% all European, and then you had that little bit, that one page was showed a pygmy with a tooth in his nose, and he was shorter than everybody else. And again, I'm not going to say he was ugly because God finds beauty in everyone. But it was a page, and most of that page was with this little short guy that they said was me. And of course, I'm sitting in a sea of white faces, and I'm the only black person in the class. And man, did I feel ashamed that this is what I was. This is what I was taught. And again, most of us, this is what we were taught in terms of how we came over here on slave ships. And I asked some questions about that because it really didn't make much sense. Things, Buck, that you had asked in your book, you know, how did all these people get crammed into this ship? 900 to 1,000 in the barrel of the ship and make it over all these horrible ways. But there was never any real answer to that. And then I asked, you know, do we have any pictures of any of these ships? And again, I'm in grade school, right? And they come up with pictures of a nail or a piece of wood that said that, you know, this was a slave ship. And from that, they built this diagram. And I'm sure everyone has seen that diagram of a slave ship, of all these slaves and how they were supposedly packed into the bow of the ship. And when I found later on in life, in college, I found out that picture wasn't an actual picture of all. It was something that the abolitionists drew up to draw sympathy for their cause, to help them to quote unquote further the cause of abolitionists back in the 1800s. So that picture that everybody looks at isn't even real. It's a fictitious picture that never ever really took place. And so we find ourselves in a situation as to where, and again, we're going to go through a whole lot of things in terms of why we're at and where we're at right now. And I'm going to say this very, very plainly that, you know, I'm here right now to get into everyone's face and to put it to you in a direct terms that we are facing not only genocide, but an extinction as a race. And our race of people are letting it happen. And
area code 657-383-0630. Press the number 1 if you want to get into the conversation, because this brother got a lot of answers for you. Now, he just laid out the groundwork, and as we get deeper in this, you're just going to see how deep the rabbit hole goes. Rick, I want you to jump in at any time because I know you're going to have some questions. But the first question I have for you, sir, and please give it to us straight and plain, you know, is the changing of our identity from color to Negro to black to African American. Is that, or could that be considered a human rights violation?
That is part of a human rights violation. That is part of genocide. That is part of the degradation of the spirit of an indigenous people. And that is also a stealing of an identity. And if anyone had their identity stolen in modern times, you know how difficult something like that can be. And one of the reasons why they began this, well, first of all, let me just go back to when the Europeans first came over here, and we're going to go a little bit further back than that. But when the Europeans first came over here, you know, you were told that they came over here and they got lost on the sea. They got lost. That they didn't know where they were going. That they thought that they were going to a place called India. Well, that's a lie. Now, how do you know that's a lie? Well, because they had two Moors that were on the ships as their navigators. Now, why would they have two Moors on their ships as navigators? Why? Because the Moors ruled Europe with the Hebrews for over 1,000 years. Their history brings it back to 700 years, but more history, when you start getting into it, it could be anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 years. And then if you go even further back than that, which we won't at this particular time, there's more interesting information when it comes down to the true indigenous people of those lands and where they came from. But to get back to this, for the case of this, when they came over here, one, they knew exactly where they were going. The kicker is, there was over a 30-year civil war in the European colonies that were ruled by the Hebrews, dark-skinned people, and that were ruled by the Moors, dark-skinned people. And when they were overthrown, the first thing that they did was commission a ship. The Spanish went out and got an Italian guy, commissioned the ship, put 2 Moors on there to bring them over here to the Americas to begin a perpetual war of extinction against us. They knew that we were here. And how did they know that we were here? Because records show, and I can only go back 500 years or so, but records show, and the Masonic history goes back a little bit further, but the records show that they were doing trade with the people in what you now call Mexico, for over 500 years. And there were some privileged whites that were not in control, but some privileged whites that were able to come along with those voyages at that particular time. So, 1, don't fool yourself in thinking that they made a mistake. They came over here and they found some Indians. That was a lie. 2, they navigated over here specifically and purposely to come over here to perpetuate a war of extinction. 3, when they
go ahead.
Go ahead. Yep.
No,
3,
go ahead,
when
sir.
When they called us Indians, they knew exactly what they were calling us because that was a worldwide term for them to depict the natural indigenous people of the land of that particular type of color. And that color, as you very well explain in your book, is the original definition of an American, I believe it was in 1828, of the American Dictionary, which is the indigenous person, copper-colored person that was originally found in this land. And that's exactly, I'm going to read it to you exactly what it has out of the American Dictionary of English language. It's Webster's Dictionary, actually, 1828. And the definition of the American is applied to the Aboriginals or copper-colored races, not copper-colored race, but races, which means that there was a huge civilization here, found here meaning the Americas, by the Europeans, but now that definition applies to the descendants of the born Europeans born in America. The name American must always exalt pride and patriotism. And to get back to your question, the reason why they began to start changing our identity is so that they can begin to assume it.
Ooh. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, you're hearing it right here. They just read it to you. Now, but they called you the American, but after they start the war against you, they started referring to themselves as Americans. And they still refer to themselves as Americans as they change your name to black, nigger, porch monkey. All of these terms he applied to you while he was taking on your identity. Continue, Mr. McLean.
Yeah, I just want to, make it plain that well into the 1800s, because they were starting this forced breeding program, they were starting this forced breeding program. They were starting this genocide program, and when they realized that there were hundreds and hundreds of millions of us, they couldn't wipe us all out. So they had to figure out on how to do something, and this is why they began to do this forced breeding program. But and that forced breeding program, just like the Asians. Now, when you take a look at the Chinese population, and it's before 2,000 years ago, was of a dark-skinned nature, was of a brown-skinned nature, was even of a what you would call a very, very, very dark melanin type nature. But they all had straight hair, and we may not get into it on this show, but there's a reason why a lot of these dark-skinned races have straight hair, along with the Europeans. But that might be a story for another day. So, well into the 1800s, like 2,000 years ago, when the Europeans began to start migrating into Asia, Asia began to start lightening up, right? So they came out of Europe, and began to start migrating down into Asia, and that's when the Asians started to light up. That was over 2,000 years ago, but even still today, you still find very dark-skinned Asians. Almost no different from the Asians that actually, Mongolians, that actually walked over to this side of the land. But in the 1800s, all right, when you want to really get down to it, we still look like the indigenous people of this nation. Now, I'm not going to say Aboriginal. I'm not going to say Indians. I'm not going to say any of the other Indian names, but I'm not going to use that term because, again, we'll get into it in the later part of the show. There's a legal connotation to all those things, which makes you subjugated to the laws of the United States, the corporate United States of America. But George Catlin, in 1841, this is what he had to say about the people of America. It's in his books and letters and notes on the North American indigenous people of America. All primitive tribes known in America are dark. What? Let's hear that again. All. How many? All primitive tribes known in America are dark. Now, 1841, understand this, there was slavery going on. So this is extremely important when you begin to start breaking down these connotations that these guys are writing. All primitive tribes known in America are dark, copper-colored, with jet black hair, while most possess curls. That's the first time I ever heard a white person that say kinky, but curls in the extreme, kind of like our hair, and in every level, wavy hair in between. In other words, we had our hair was in a variety of textures, and one of the reasons why our very curly or wavy hair became kind of straight was because we also used braids in our hair. And if anyone ever really grew out the hairs, and especially with people back in the 70s, early 80s, when you braided your hair and you take it out of braids, your hair gets kind of straight. And if you put buffalo grease onto it, it can become very straight. And this is where you begin to start getting that straightened look hair or type of wavy hair that you see in a lot of these pictures with dark-skinned Indians. The texture of the hair is generally fine, soft, or silk, or coarse and harsh. The hair of the men falling down to their arms and sometimes to the ground is divided into plaits and slabs 2 inches wide and filled with a proportion of glue on earth, which becomes very hard and remains unchanged from year to year. Today, this is a form of hair called locks. Isn't that interesting? Locks were developed way back before the Europeans ever came here, and this is how they were describing us. This is how they were describing what you would call the primitive tribes, and we weren't tribal. There's a reason why I say we weren't tribal, and I'll get to that in just a second. But we weren't tribal. So when you begin to start talking about the native races of the Pacific states of North America by Hubert Howard Long in 1874, and that was on his page 348. This is what he wrote. Their complexion is much darker than that of the tribes further north, often being nearly black. So with their matted, bushy hair, which is frequently cut short, they present a very uncouth appearance. Uncouth, meaning very strange to them. So this is just to give you an example of who or what you really are in terms of your nationality. Your nationality isn't African, although they brought Africans over. Your nationality is what we will call right now of the Americas, of this side of the earth. And this is one of the reasons why when you begin to start, explaining why did they create the African American? Why did they create, so-called black people? And why did they create all of these different types of names in our races? And the reason is because they needed to try to get us, first of all, as far away from what we are natural to our land, so that that way we wouldn't have any connection to it. Because basically that's what we were. We were connected to our land, and through our land we were connected to our women, and our women were also connected to the land because they were breeders, they were developers, and they were the people that actually birthed things into life. So as a nation of people, our basic is that to take care of the humans that are on this earth, and take that of all of the other types of animals that are on this earth, and to take care of this part of the earth in itself, which is also described, I don't know if you guys heard of the Kootenai Indians, but in the Kootenai Indians, they also break down why they are here, and they said that the God of the sky have put them here on this part of the earth to take care of the earth, and if they take care of the earth will give them everything that they need, and everything that they need will be provided from the earth because they will be taking care of their responsibility. So it's really interesting when we begin to start getting into what they say are the darker complexions of tribes of the north, and basically the lighter complexions of that going out west. North, when I say north-south, the lighter complexions are up north, west of north, and the darker complexions are south, Mississippi, Florida, Georgia, North Carolinas, and all those other kinds of places. And so you need to understand that the reason why they created this was so that they can take everything away from you. They take away your language. They take away your true religion. They take away your land. And again, when they take away your land, they take away the ability of you being able to have economics, which means that if you don't have land or your economics, your civilization is pretty much broken. And when you get into a broken civilization, that's what happened with the deterioration of the indigenous people here in North America, because we were a very strong group of people. And I don't know if any of you guys heard of the Indian Wars, the Indian Wars of the Americas. And when I say of the Americas, I go all the way back down to the Incas. When you heard about those guys down there, the conquistadors, and we heard a great story how they came here and they got off their ships with 200 people and they leveled a nation of over 200,000. Well, this is when the Indian Wars really started, and when you look into it, the Incas were also black. All of their tribal kings, all of their tribal leaders, and I wouldn't say tribal leaders, but all the civilization leaders, the country leaders, all of the leaders were of a very dark skin and curly hair. This is what was here, and how they began to lose was with the vigilant firepower that the whites got from the Chinese, gunpowder and guns, and mixed in with 50,000 to 100,000 Mongolian Indians. They proceeded to assault those tribes down there, and that's how this tribe was broken, and that's how the Americas was lost. It was lost because the confederations that they had the confederations broke up, and the reason why they pretty much broke up was because the Mongolian Indians that were part of the federations didn't uphold their end of the bargain.
657-383-0630. We're on with Ronnie McClain, and he's talking about this genocide. Mr. McClain, let me ask you, what we see today a repeat of what you were talking about when you said that the Europeans buddied up with the Mongolians to start these wars? Are we seeing a repeat of that today with all the foreigners that are coming over to America, with all the, because everybody's coming from the other side of the world? This is something that I don't think we understand fully. Everything we know is people who are from the opposite side of the world have came over here and taught us, and many of us have fell for it. So are you seeing today, is that a repeat of what you just said, where all these people are coming over here assaulting us militarily and economically?
Yes, it's in a different vein, because now we're dealing with a globalism, which we were dealing with the globalism back then. But the globalism back then had to break the power of the of what I call the carbonated man, the man that was designed to take care of this earth. So today, what they're trying to do is they're trying to put forth a program to enslave everyone, and they pretty much almost have exactly what they want. But hopefully within a month or so, we're going to put a little bit of a wrinkle in that by making the world stop in their tracks, because of the Indigenous or the Aboriginal, the Indigenous Americans is not dead. We're alive and we are still here. So yes, what happened back then, and I need everybody to understand this, because what you're seeing today is bad. The killings in the street, the what you would consider to be the lack of morality by police officers, by the justice system, by political leaders, the total lack of caring of life, and the justification and the demonization of the victims that you see continuously happening. I mean, there was another killing, I believe, over this weekend, and if you notice, they follow the same type of thing. They demonize the person, right? They demonize them. They tear them apart in the media, and then they justify exactly what happened, saying that there's reasons why all this stuff has happened. I mean, the guy had a body cam. The police officer had a body camera on him, and his boss, the lieutenant or the sheriff, looked at this body cam, and the only thing that he had to say was, "Man, it happened so quick." Right? It's hard to tell what actually really happened. There was a body camera on him. So the things that you're seeing now, and the reason why I was explaining some of the things of the indignations that had happened before in terms of genocide back in the past, is because they did the same exact thing back in the past, but back in the past, they didn't have any moral justice with them. The moral justice was with the church and with their right to come into another person's land and take it over. So there are instances where when you read the writings of the first whites or the first Europeans that come into this land, you read the writings in the 1400s, in the 1500s, and in the 1600s, where they just come up to a woman who was pregnant and shoot them right in the head, where they stick pokers in their bodies, females, stick pokers right in their bodies, all the way up until they're dead. They have a total. They had a total disregard to any kind of life whatsoever, and they were massacring people. And I mean, I have information now when we want to start mapping this violence about Indian massacres that has happened from the 1400s all the way up to today. And it's difficult to determine the total number of people who died as a result of what you would call Indian massacres. But however, one book, The Wild Frontier, our associates during the American and Indian War, from Jamestown Colony to Wounded Knee, presents an estimate by counting every record of atrocity in the area that would eventually become the continental United States. From the first 1,500 or 1511 to the closing of the frontier of 1890. The parameters were limited to the international and indiscriminate murder, torture, mutilation of civilians. They call them civilians, but of people. The reason why they're using that word civilian is because they were the ones that owned the land. The wounded and the prisoners revealed in over, well, they say 7,193 people died from peperated by those European accounts, and 9,000 people died from peperated Native Americans, which you know is a lie, because they were over, in their own accounts, dictated over 100 million people that were killed, and that was besides the fact of the ones that were destroyed by disease. All right?
Now, talk to us about genocide. This is what I want to get into, the genocide, and how do we, as a nation of people, help perpetuate and spread their genocidal ways?
Well, first of all, you have to understand that. All right, I'm gonna speak very plain. I'm gonna be very plain with you. Now, I'm a minister of the church, right? I know about prophecy. I know about all the, the Bible verses and the passages and all that other type stuff. But I want one person to tell me that out of all the hours that you spent in church or watched church on TV, has there ever been one person who prophesies or went into a Holy Ghost spirit and says, "This isn't who you are. You are indigenous to the nation of North America, and you need to rise back up in order for you to be able to claim your ancestral heritage."
No.
Has there been one person? This one person, whether you're on the phone, and if you pick this up on a podcast, if you're a minister of the church, a deacon, a deaconess in the choir, sitting in the pews, part of a church for over 50, 60 years, proud of you, I'm glad you are, I'm not trying to take that away from you. But has there been anybody that come up and said, this is what's really going on by when they have these prophecies? And I'm sure that a lot of people have been to these churches and went to some prophecy stuff, right? You touch on your head and stuff like that and say, you're destined to go here, and, you got some sort of a disease and you're going to get healed tomorrow. Your mother's got this. You're actually not an African American. You are a Native American. You're not even a Native American. You're an Indigenous American of the land of North America. I never heard that. Sorry. So I never heard that from any of these TV preachers or anybody. And so when you begin to start looking at that, this is one of the ways that we ourselves begin to start perpetrating a fraud on our own people when we begin to start steering ourselves away from what the truth is. You got to remember.
So that's a form of genocide too. When we seeing what's going on, especially these people who are heading these organizations, they're seeing and understanding what's going on, but they're not letting their congregation know what is going on. So that's a form of us being part of the genocide or helping push this genocidal forward.
That's right. That is a part of genocide. When you begin to start buying into the to Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030, that's a form of genocide. The other form of genocide is that you are stared into a vein of being that was forced by your leaders because they were afraid that the whole entire race was going to be wiped out. So one of the things that I learned when I was taking my first African American study course was that when we were coming out of slavery, and when we had a choice. And I said, why didn't we go directly for our own country, our own nation? Because that's where we needed to be. They said they had a choice, and the choice was we can try to do that, but after everything that they've been through, after everything that they've seen, and after how vicious. I mean, you think what you're seeing today is vicious. You ain't seen nothing yet. It's coming back. You ain't seen nothing yet because of the viciousness of what they just got out of. What they chose was survival. They chose survival, and a lot of people were even scared to talk about who or what they truly were because they were afraid of being killed. They were afraid of teaching the children the truth because they're afraid of the children being killed. So that was a form of genocide as well, because they killed within inside of you the very being that you were meant to be. And they also killed it in succeeding generations. This is now remember what George Washington said. And George Washington was asked, "What do you think is going to become of these natives?" He said, "They're going to be extinct within my lifetime." And he said, "And if they're not going to actually be extinct, they're going to be assimilated. That's genocide. They're going to be breeded out. That's genocide. Or they're going to be killed off. That's genocide." Now that was George Washington. That was George Washington.
Now, all of us being that when you look around, you still see a lot of us here. A lot of us weren't killed out because we're still here. But the assimilation part is like where I'm at now, where the majority of people who call themselves African Americans, they honestly believe that they swam over here from Africa. A lot of the people that call themselves African American now, they have taken on the people who came over here and conquered them religious ideologies. Everything that they do, they've taken it over. What is making it so hard for us to recognize what is happening to us and take action to do something about it?
A few things. And I'll start with this. First of all, they don't know the truth about the slave trade. And they also don't know the truth about where the majority of the slave trade was actually fractioned. They also don't know why and what part of these African people actually came over here and in what vein they actually came over here. The Muslim population over there in Africa actually helped a lot of the slave trade because they were getting rid of a lot of people that they weren't able to handle. Because remember, there was a huge slave trade in the Arab countries dealing with Africans. So those Africans were in a huge slave trade. The ones that they described themselves as the Europeans were actually happening with the Arabs. Some of those Arabs are trying to get rid of some of their Hebrew people and some of their other Moorish people, whatever, who lost all those wars over there in Europe. A lot of other people also came from Europe. You say, what? Black people come from Europe? Yes, a lot of these black people also came from Europe, but it came twofold because they were taking a lot of males out of America, shipping them over into Europe, and a lot of those males that found themselves in Europe found themselves on the African slave trade, and coming back over to either the Caribbean or to Brazil or to the Americas. So when you begin to start looking at how many actual Africans actually really came over here, they weren't as many as they say. They said there was over 12 million, which again is a lie. But they also said that there were about 500 to 700,000, not million, thousand, that came over here into the Americas. So now, when black people begin to start looking at themselves, they have to think realistically. They got to be. Remember, black people. And I hate to say this, if you're listening and you say I'm an African American or I'm a black person, you're taught not to think for yourself. You were taught just to assimilate information into you and say, okay, that's fine, that's good, that's the way it is. You were taught not to ask any questions or to think critically. Because if you began to start thinking critically, you began to start asking all kinds of questions, such as, where are all the slave ships, right? What was the North American slave trade? And when you say the North American slave trade, what was the North Carolina, the Carolina slave trade, right? The Carolina slave trade went from South Carolina, the state that we know now as the South Carolina, all the way down through Georgia, Mississippi, all the way into the Caribbean. All of that whole entire area was considered to be the Carolinas, the jurisdiction of the Carolinas, and they were doing a lot of slave swap and trying to get as many people off the mainland and onto those islands as possible. So when you begin to start saying, why are we contributing to our own genocide, it's because, one, we don't know who we are. Two, we were never taught the true information about who we were. Three, we weren't allowed to read the information about who we are. And then four, we have a bunch of sellouts who know the truth, who know what's happening, but don't want to lose their prestige in this particular world that we're living in now. So my saying is that you're going to have to stand up. And you're going to have to start taking a critical look as to why your education systems are failing. You're going to have to take a critical look as to why there's 2 million people in jail and almost 40%, 45% of them are black within them. You have to take a look as to why, that's one of the things that I wanted to get into, 25 things everyone needs to know about the lives of black people in America. And the numbers that I will be telling you illustrate an unfinished business in our efforts to establish justice for all. But the other thing, and the most important thing, is that we have to understand that there's absolutely nothing you can do to improve your condition while you are in a system that is being ruled by your abuser. Now, earlier I told you that I was in, I spent 10 years doing child abuse in New York City. I spent another 5 years doing foster care, which is another branch of the child abuse. I also went into the to daycare licensing to find out how they were actually netting all this stuff together, so that way they can feed you and begin to start training you from a very early age. So that being said, you get into the social service, you get into the psychology of it. And the psychology of it is that, you know, no one likes to be abused, at least not in the beginning. That's the reason why you have hazing, because the more that you are hazed, the more it's difficult for you to justify getting out of it, because if you get out of it, you have to justify how long you stayed in that hazing. So a form of hazing went on here in the United States, and that's genocide. That's the deterioration of human rights. And when you are in a system of your abuser, when you're living in a house with an abuser, you can never get better, you can never get well. When you're living under the rules that are being established by that abuser. So when you're living in the house of your abuser, you can go to the doctor, you can go to the social service people, you can go to your psychologist, you can go to your psychiatrist, right? You can begin to start taking all these kind of psychiatric pills and all this other type stuff. But it's at the direction and at the rule of the system upon which you're living in. You're living in your abuser's system. So until you're out of that system, you can never design anything for yourself that is going to succeed, because the system is designed not only to abuse you, but it's designed to eradicate you as a species on this earth.
657-383-0630, African American Ain't African Radio. You can also check us out on the Facebook page, African Americans Ain't African. Oh, the young folks are putting up information that's going to blow you away. Also, check out our website, AfricanAmericansAintAfrican.org. Support us. We got African American Ain't African T-shirts that are rolling off the racks now. So please support us at AfricanAmericansAintAfrican.org. Mr. McLean.
Yes.
Okay. You made us understand. You made us understand the genocide. So how does this get into human rights? Because what the African American, Black, Negro people have been doing the last 60, 75 years, we've been into civil rights. Can you tell us the difference between civil rights and human rights?
All right. First of all, the thing that I need to tell you is that our situation goes beyond human rights. But that's a story of another day, but I need to put that out there because you need to know how serious the situation is. The reason why we're putting it in terms of human rights is because this is the closest thing that we can get to being able to try to get ourselves back into a place as to where we can have the right to self-determination. Let me read you something. We charge the United States of America with the willful violation of human rights, as stated in the UN Human Rights Charter, drafted by representatives with different legal and cultural backgrounds from all regions of the world. The declaration was proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in Paris on 10th of December of 1948. General Assembly Resolution 217, paragraph 3, as a common standard of achievements for all peoples and nations on this earth. Although we stand by the whole document, we would like to highlight a few sections. Whereas we disregard the contempt of human rights have resulted in the barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of man and mankind, and the advent of the world in which humans begins and shall enjoy freedom and speech and the belief and freedom of fear, and once has been proclaimed by the highest aspiration and commonest people. So the difference between the civil rights is that, you know, there was an owl out in the Northwest over there in Washington, an owl. And you had these people over there who were trying to cut down the forest. And they said you can't cut down the forest because the owl had civil rights. The owl had civil rights. You have people coming around saying that, you know, it's bad to put out rat poison. You know, look at PETA and a lot of this stuff. You know, they say it's bad to put out rat poison and stuff like that because you're killing species that have civil rights. They have a right to exist, and you shouldn't treat them inhumanely. So when you talk about civil rights, first of all, when you begin to start talking about civil rights, you begin to start getting into the subject matter of the Constitution in itself, and specifically the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. So when you begin to start talking about civil rights, Martin Luther King said that a person who is a citizen of a country has a right to participate on the jury and has a right to vote. Those are the type of civil rights that declare you a citizen of a country and that can give you the rights that you need to have in your country. So when the first word came out of your mouth about civil rights, you were telling the world you're less than human. 2, you're not even a citizen of the country upon which you were born in. And then you made yourself feel better by saying that as long as we can be treated as equals, not as equal citizens, but as equals, not as equal human beings, but as equals. And then that term equal had so many different connotations that it's almost impossible for a governmental agency to give you any kind of civil rights, no less human rights. So when you begin to start looking at civil rights means absolutely nothing in terms of you being a human being. It's a legal term for trying to force a government to treat you a little closer to a human being, which when you begin to start looking at your history, you're more than a human. So you're not even trying to get up to parity to where you are when you talk about civil rights. So that civil rights garbage was a false and a facsimile of something that they put out there so that they can take you further off your path to further commit you to genocide. When you take a look at the civil rights movement in itself, it did 2 things. Before civil rights, you were a lot better before civil rights, because before civil rights, you had businesses. You did business in your own community. You had black banks. You had motor shops, people selling you tires, and food stores and supermarkets and stuff like that. You were living really, really, really well before that civil rights stuff. You weren't living like white folks, because the white folks were living not so great in the South, because you got to remember, when slavery ended, all the people that were taking care of all their books and all their farmland left. Those were the indigenous people, the indigenous population. That's the reason why they had us working and tilling their land, because we knew how to do it, right? They didn't, we did. That's the reason why they had to force us to do that in order for us to grow. I mean, who kept them alive when they were dying on the shores of Virginia? You know, it was the indigenous man who had a great heart and looked at them as a bunch of savages from another land. So that's your civil rights. Civil rights is more of a legal thing with inside of a country, begging them to treat you in a manner that you're actually more worthy of. Human rights, and again, in order for us to be who we are, we have to go beyond that. But human rights is more of an international type situation where you become a parity on the face of the earth. right? So there's certain things that every single person that is born on the earth has a right to, right? No one should be held in slavery or servitude. Now, in civil rights, when you listen to the 14th Amendment, it talks about involuntary servitude. No one should be held in involuntary servitude. But it doesn't tell you anything about voluntary servitude, which they tricked everybody into with those amendments. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile, meaning that they just can't take you off your land and do whatever they want to you. Everyone has a right to a nationality. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his or her nationality, nor denied the right to change his nationality, which is exactly what they did to the indigenous people of this land so many different times. Every time you had a different designation, such as Negro, they changed your nationality. Black, they changed your nationality. Right? African American, they changed your nationality. They like that word African American because that means you're a conquered people, and I know that you explained that many times on your shows before, so we don't have to even get into that designation. Everyone's entitled to a social and international order in which rights and freedoms set forth in the Declaration that can be fully realized. Now understand this. I don't care who you are in America. If you have dark skin, you have absolutely no say-so in international law or international matters. Even your friend Jesse Jackson, yes, I did say even your friend Jesse Jackson, who proclaimed that he wanted to be African Americans and said, everybody should listen to Roots because it's real. But people today still believe Roots is real. That guy wrote a book. Well, let me back up. He didn't actually write the book. He plagiarized the book from some white guy that wrote the book about 10 to 20 years before his time, and he did it, I believe, as a command from his superiors, because I believe he was part of of the CIA institution or one of those institutions, National Security Administration or something like that he was once a part of. So he also got sued because of his plagiarism, and then he ultimately had to pay out anywhere from $500,000 to $700,000 from that storybook that he wrote. But the damage was already done. And let me just stick with Roots for a second, because Roots. Now, Roots, wasn't that like a 2-month-long miniseries?
Yes.
No, I mean, think about that. A 3-hour movie today costs about $400 million. Roots was so long. It had every single black story you can imagine inside that movie, and White Star. Who funded that? Who funded that? And where were they able to get all that television time for them to be able to put that out there? Now, I just want people to take a look at that, because that goes into your human rights too, because that was a big slap in the face to every indigenous person on this side of the earth, whether they're mixed with African or not.
And the people today, they still believe it. I think they did an updated version of it, knowing that the story was, false in the beginning. Area code 657-383-0630. We're on African Americans Ain't African Radio. We have a couple of callers on the line, but first I want to get to Rick Moon. Rick Moon, what you thinking about what you're hearing right now?
Oh yeah, I'm very impressed. He really dropped it down. But I wanted to ask a question. Wouldn't that be part of the genocide? Like stuff like crimes against nature. For like all of this concrete they building, covering the earth and all these artificial buildings. Deforestation of the trees. Then you got this stuff like they coming out with this fake stuff like this DNA test where all you gotta do is build some speech and tell you what country you came from, stuff like that. What do you think about that?
All right, I'm glad you asked that question because it gets into the violation of the United States Declarations on the rights of indigenous peoples. All right, so wherever you are right now, and anybody who's out there listening, if you're in St. Louis, if you're in Baltimore, if you're somewhere in Georgia, if you're somewhere in California, you can say Los Angeles or any of those places out there, you are sitting on a country, or you're sitting on a city that once was owned by indigenous people. And when you go back into the records, and now I'm getting into why they're doing all this concrete stuff and they're trying to block everything out and why it's a violation of indigenous rights. You are on land that they slaughtered the people. They slaughtered them, killed them outright, made sure that there was nobody left. And then when there was nobody left, they moved their people into their houses and then began to start taking their houses down and building over all of that stuff. They began to creating their own civilization on top of the civilization that they had and the same spirit of the civilization that was already there. Where do you think the United States got all of their laws from? People say it was from Rome, right? Rome was a republic. Not only that, but also Rome, by the time they got over here, was ruled by monarchy, right? All the Europeans and everyone else on that other side of the great pond that we call the Atlantic Ocean, they all had kings and queens, monarchs. All of a sudden, they come over here and they find government. So the reason why they tore down all the trees, and the reason why that they're trying to build over all of our mounds, and the reason why they're trying to hide all of the pyramids that are over here, there are thousands of pyramids, thousands of them. There are hundreds of thousands of mountains. They don't want you going into the Grand Canyon. Do you know why? Why? One, the Grand Canyon has three pyramids in the Grand Canyon that is of a triangle nature and the same in the same veins as some of the star systems up in the sky. They also, back in the 1800s, found a tunnel or a cave that had all kinds of artifacts in there, and the artifacts were from Egypt. They were from all parts of the known world. They had mummified structures in there, right? And then when the guy came out, he started writing this. And the reason why we know about this is because it made it into some of the local newspapers. This guy, when he reported back to Washington, to the Smithsonian Institute, the guy that located this disappeared, and then they shut down the Grand Canyon so nobody can go on there. So now the only thing you can do is look over a cliff, pretty much, and then take a little ride down a little bit of a section of it. But the reason why that they're trying to make sure that all these things are federalized and putting in this fake Indian laws is so that they can keep you away from the truth of who and what you are. That is a direct violation of indigenous people. And let me get into a little bit of that because the United States has to be charged, the corporation of the United States of America, with the willful violation of indigenous rights, and would like to start here. Who are the indigenous peoples? Indigenous peoples are the descendants of the original people or occupants of the land before the lands were taken over by or conquered by others. Many indigenous people have maintained their traditional cultures and identities, way of dress, language, and cultivation of land. We were forced not to be able to do a lot of these things, but we try to keep it into what we are through some of the things that we're doing today. Therefore, they have a strong and deep connection with their ancestral territories and cultures and identity. And if that wasn't true, we would not be having this conversation today. Further, there is no international agreement on the definition of indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples decide whether they consider themselves to be indigenous. This is known as self-identification. Indigenous people take pride in their identity and determination to maintain their distinctness as an indigenous people. So when you look at the Olmecs, who were here 16,000 years and almost 8,000 years before any Mongolian tribe set foot on this part of North America. The Zai people. These are the people who we come from. And also, there was a study that was done by the History Channel. The original one, I believe, was almost like 2 hours. This is how I knew it was the truth. You know it's the truth because it took 2 hours to break the news that the people that were here were black. It took 2 hours to do that. So they had to gently guide themselves into it in order for them to bring out the truth. And at the end of that, the truth was that these black people were here, so-called black people, these indigenous people, these carbon people were here on this side of the earth 150 to 100,000 years before anybody else set foot over here. This is who we are.
Mr. McLean, we have a caller on the line that'd like to converse with you. Area code 240. Yes. Let me find him. Area code 240. Are you there? You're on with Mr. McLean.
Oh,
area code.
You go to Galveston, right?
Area code 240. Are you there?
I hear somebody trying to talk. So go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. McLean. Yes. Are you there?
Talking to me?
Yes, I hear you. You can ask your question.
Okay. Yeah. This is Windwalker. Wagapo, everyone.
Mwapo.
Mwapo to you.
How you doing, brother? I'm getting ready to get into a quiet space right here. Give me a quick minute. I'm like in transit here. I'm out on the road, but I'm getting. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. Wagapo, everyone. This is Windwalker. It's good to be here. Good to be back. I've been listening to your show, brother. A number of things that you brought up is definitely relevant. I mean, Buck knows me, Rich. I mean, this is our time. Soul brothers, soul sisters, the solar system, solar plexus. Okay, another thing was happening. Well, I'm from Maryland. I'm Nanticoke and Cherokee. I carry both of those bloodlines, those civilizations, those nations. The Chesapeake area. Okay, there was a slave port, Chrisfield. I mean, because my indigenous ancestors there, they got slammed, big time. The ones that they said that they took into Jamestown, the first the African slaves, that's bogus. They were Wackamists that the Dutch had defeated in the war, the ones that they could capture. 1619, 1650, that time frame. So we need to, people need to. I told everyone I know about that. Another thing that was going on, like you said, okay, the Mongolians came over here. Most of the warriors were on the West Coast fighting that war against them. We got hit on two fronts, and it's been systematic. I understand the Manchurians. They are brothers. They hadn't sold out against us. The Mongolians, they did. And to understand, we're part of an even more ancient confederation. That's the reason why the Republicans, they have the elephant for that symbol of all things. Why would they pick the elephant? Because it has to do with Hannibal and Carthage. For understand, Hannibal's 4th or 5th great grandfather was over here in the Chesapeake, and he planted a stone, a monumental stone in the Nanticokes where the vanguard to guard that. The Creator, she gave all the confederacies, all the nations, their territories and what to do. And like I said, we're still here. I mean, this is our time, and they know it. They can't. They bought off these cronies, these clowns out here who perpetrate to be our leaders. The Al Sharptons, the rest of them, the Jesse Jackson. People need to realize that they've been getting paid, okay, to play at, as well as the undertakers are in this. They're taking our organs, our blood type. we're worth $28 million dead. But they realize, okay, if we become extinct, they cease to exist. But there's so many. Go ahead.
You had a question from Mr. McLean?
Oh, sorry. I get me, Buck. I get kind of carried away, but I'm glad that you're on, brother. If you could talk more on the all the major city, all the cities that are throughout Turtle Island, their power centers. You could talk about that they covered up, that they took from us.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right in terms of these wars. I want to first comment on the wars. One of the first wars that they were having with the Indian Wars were over there in the what we now call the FEMA Region 4 system. And it was, I'm trying to figure out now, most of the indigenous nations were formed in confederations, right? Up and down, as you was talking about, the California coast, and up and down the eastern seaboard, right? There was a confederation. I believe the confederation had the Yosemite in it. They had they also had the Cherokee. It was called the Muscon. I think it was the Muscon Confederation, and there was about 4 or 5 different Indian nations, not tribes. And I'm going to tell you the difference between the tribal and nation building, and why we were different from what you would see over there in the Africans in just a second. But when that war was going on, we had the Europeans beat. We had them beat. And it would be a totally different America today if the Cherokee Nation didn't separate from the Confederation and side with the with what we now know as the British Empire. It was those Cherokee people from the Mongolian Indian side of things that sided with them, which turned the tide of the war. And so she's absolutely right in terms of these wars and how they were fighting and how they were beating the hell out of us. But it took them a long time to do what they wanted to do, because a lot of us are still here today fighting.
One of the things he brought up was the Republicans' use of the icon or the symbol, the elephant, referring to the Carthaginians and Hannibal. Could you talk about the Carthaginians, what happened to the Carthaginian, and how it relates to us here?
All right. Getting into something else here now, but let us. All right. Understand that we are faced with 2 distinctive, not possibilities, but what's going to happen. We're either going to live or we're going to die. We're either going to live or we're going to die. And a lot of times you always hear, well, the next generation is going to have to stand up and do what we have to do. No. I'm telling you this right now. It is our generation. It is this generation that is talking right here on the radio right now. If we get beyond our generation, all preceding generations are lost, and our genocide on this planet will be complete. We believe that an unjust and unfair war has been perpetuated on the peaceful people of this part of the earth by the governments and states that had every intention to steal this indigenous land and destroy the civilization that was here before them. The occupying forces transformed and now known as the corporate of the United States, that in the same hard-fought spirit of Resolution 181, the partition resolution of the 29th of November of 1947, in which resulted in the creation of a Jewish state, and what is called re-reparations of the so-called homeland, repatriation of the so-called homeland of the Jewish people. And I'm going to say this because this is something that I talked about earlier. We, the indigenous people of the United States, of the united front line of the newly reestablished combined indigenous nations, are demanding the partitioning of the country called the United States of America on the lines known as FEMA Region Number 4. As in the lessons learned from the ordeals of the Carthaginian people that was totally eradicated by the Roman Empire and discarded from their lands, forever lost in the annals of history, we find the same history repeating itself with the indigenous people of the Americas. The very name African American symbolizes the very state in which the corporation of the United States is meant to deal with the indigenous people of North America. Complete and total eradication of their history. Complete and total denial of their human rights. Complete and total denial of indigenous rights, and complete and total genocide of every single person that even looks like them. The so-called conquered African American person. Now, when you hear those words, understand that the Carthaginian Empire was huge. It was part of the Egyptian Empire, which was even huger. It was part of a fertile land where they were one of the centers of trade on this planet. When I say on this planet, because I do believe that the Egyptians, the Carthaginians, were doing trade over here in North America. Why do I say that? I say that because in the Copper Age, Europe and the rest of that world over there didn't have enough copper to sustain the type of metallurgy from copper on that land. Most of those metallurgies and most of that copper was dug up over here and transported back over to the other side of the world. What happened with the Carthaginians is that in the Third Punic War, Africanus Scipio, or Scipio Africanus, is a name given to him by his emperor, conquered Hannibal in a surprise attack, dividing the nation and separating all their military units, making Hannibal almost impossible to be able to defeat the Roman Empire. Once that defeat was complete, they began to start eradicating the whole entire place. The first thing that they did was take away the name of their country. They called that little sliver of land that they took over Africa. So the whole entire piece of land that you hear now that is Africa is not Africa. That was actually called Ethiopia, and the Americas was also called Western Ethiopia. So that little sliver of land was called Africa. And then they took away the name of the people. The name of the people were called Africans. So instead of Carthaginians, instead of Carthage now turns into Africa. And the people now turn into Africans, named after their conqueror. So now they were named Africans, meaning conquered people. So they erased them almost completely out of history. The only thing we got left of those Carthaginian people and the greatness of their land is a few ruins that show us how great their civilization truly was. And it truly was a great civilization.
Mr. McLean.
This is the same.
Mr. McLean, we have another caller. I wanted to get in area code 901. 901. You're on with Mr. McLean.
No, it's Sherry from Memphis. I do apologize. I got in on the show a little late, but I just regarding the census and the whole hiding of who we are and, that we are the indigenous people of this land. When I started my journey during my lineage, there are nuggets and clues that are in that census and in those documentation. I noticed that I found my great-grandmother, who was 79 years old at the time. She's on the 1930 census as well as the 1940 census. So that makes me know that my mother, who's 83 years old, told me my great-grandmother could not speak.
Ma'am, could you... Ma'am, you're coming in kind of broken. Can you come again? You're coming in kind of broken.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine, but it's some background noise, and we want people to hear what you have to say.
Okay, well, I took you off speaker. But I just wanted to say that there are some nuggets and some clues in those census records, in those documentation. My mother, who is 83 years old, when she was giving me a little information, she told me that my great-grandmother did not speak English. So she said that we didn't really understand what she was saying. She just used to, kind of let us know. But anyway, the thing is, when I looked at the 1930 census as well as the 1940 census, my great-grandmother at that time was 79 years old. So if she was 79 years old, and this is the 1930 and 1940 census, what they tell you, she been there all the time. The reason why she didn't speak English, because when my mother and them was young, and when the land was cleared or taken from them, and they made them sharecropper on the land for 23 years, so point blank, she was already there, 79 years old in 1930. Where else could she have been? My mother said they never lived anywhere but there. And then when I looked at the census, you can see, if you look down on those census, whoever started to do their lineage, you will notice that the families are very, very close in the township because they were living on their land and they all had sections of acres to raise their family on. But when the invaders came in and took their land, they either had a choice to either leave or either forced to become sharecroppers.
Mr. McClain, you want to comment on that?
Well, and this is one of the things about we mentioned we mentioned DNA earlier, and we mentioned about how faulty the DNA system is, and I will tell everybody, don't go on that family.com, that whatever that stuff is, or any of those DNA sites or anything else like that. A lot of the things that we have to go by is oral history that is remembered from our past. And our people are very good with oral history. This is one of the ways that we kept a lot of things going on. This is one of the reasons why we're very good at singing and memorizing songs and stuff like that, because we can pass it from one generation to another. So when you begin to start waking up, and you begin to start looking at what's going on around you, you begin to start asking all different types of questions as who are you actually as a human being? Why is there only one particular species on Earth that have curly type hair and every other species on Earth has long straight hair? Why are we the only ones that look the way that we do? Why are we around this Earth the most persecuted people on the planet? Why does there seem to be a war that has been perpetuated to try to wipe us completely all out? So when she talks about her family history and she talks about, remembering what her great-grandmother was and hearing those stories and stuff like that, these are the things that we need to do to be able to dig back down into our history. The other thing that we need to do is understand that we're in a precarious situation right now, and I know our time is starting to get kind of short. We have probably about another 30 minutes to go, I guess. So I want to really start getting into, we know what the problem is. I mean, we know what the situation about genocide is. We know that the so-called African American people, in terms of abortion, is 30% of all abortions that are perpetuated in the Americas. The Hispanics are up to 35. The whites are 36. The other people are 9%, but black people have one of the highest rates. I would say the highest rates of abortion in the Americas, not just in North America, but in the Americas. And remember, at best, we're 14% of the population if you include everyone, including those who consider themselves to be of mixed race. And those who consider themselves not of mixed race, it brings it down to almost below 13%. So 30% of African Americans having abortions is insane, and that goes into our genocide. But it also goes into our educational system, our legal system, our justice system. And again, it's a system. And in order for us to be able to fix these systems, We have to get out of the system that we're in and have a right to self-determination to bring our own people back to who they really are in terms of bringing them the true education and the true history. And that's when the fight for our freedom is really going to take place. It's not marching out in these streets shooting people. And we'll be honest with you. Anybody out there marching in these streets right now, that's not where the fight is. Anybody out there toting a gun, toting rifles, or anything else like that, or even, these fake shootings out there that are being done by the government, that's not where it is. Our fight's going to come when we present our case over to the UN, and we're going to have to prove to the world and who and what we are. That's where our fight is going to be. Because there's going to be people on our own. Yep.
Let me ask you this, because this is the problem I have with the UN. The UN are the same motherfuckers that's conquering us. The UN, the votes of the UN are the same European conquerors that are conquering this whole planet. So how do we go to them with the petition?
Coming in broken, Bob.
Yep, you're coming in broken.
Rick, did you pick up what I said, Rick?
No, you came in broken.
Okay, cool. My question is simply this. The UN are the same powerhouses, Europe, France, Spain, all those European powers. The UN is made up of those people who have all the votes. All the other countries that are in the UN, they don't really have a say-so. So how do we take a petition to a UN and they're the same ones that's kicking our ass? How do we make that work?
All right. So a few things. One, when they brought up the UN Resolution 181 for the Jewish state, they didn't have all the votes. In fact, there weren't as many people on the planet in the UN or in that legislature body as there are today. Right? Today. Now is a time for us to be able to make a move to try to get this in front of the world, because I have to be honest with you, it's not just the United States is at fault. It's almost every nation on this planet that is at fault that has say-so in the UN. So if they're unwilling to do what they did for people on the other side of the earth, in the same vein that they have to do it for us, then you know exactly where you stand on this planet. Then that brings us into a whole nother ball game. All right? So my purpose is to stop the bullshit. Stop the talking. Stop the fraternizing. Stop the crapping around. Right? It's time. I'm going to force every person who's out there marching for Black Lives Matter, every person that says that they're for this, that, or the other thing, or for freedom, I'm gonna force them, and I'm gonna make sure that they're gonna put their money where their mouth is. And if they don't, it's gonna be very apparent as to what we have to do then. So our first thing is to bring. This is a world thing. We're in their world. You remember that. Somehow, regardless of how it happened, we lost our civilization. We lost our world. We're now in a world that they're recreating. Right? A lot of people in the world are now, they have some sort of a moral justice. They're trying to be moral. They're trying to assume and take on the identity of the original carbon people that are on this earth. Moral, decent, righteous people with a sense of justice, dignity, and fairness. So we have a very good chance when you break down all the different votes in the United States for this position, not only to be accepted, but there's enough enemies or enough people in the legislature of the UN to be able to bring this forth into a resolution and have it acted upon. So it's plain politics, plain world politics. But in order for us to get to where we need to go, first we need to know exactly where we stand. Now, if we stand in a situation as to where we can't get free through peace, then we're talking about a whole nother ballgame. We need to sit down and we have another conversation. And then, people better be ready to start marching for real.
Well, since we have assimilated, so I'm talking about reality, and I'm listening to what you're saying, because you're saying that if this generation here, because the civil rights generation, they laid out their groundwork, they're gone. The civil rights generation's mantra is, we will overcome someday. They won't be here to help us overcome, but that's what they laid out. The people that are over here in America right now, most of the people that are over here, the foreigners that are over here are Africans, Asians, and Europeans, Middle Easterns, India. All these people are over here right now teaching us how to think and how to behave. And the so-called Negro, he's doing a good job. He's very obedient. He's very loving and kind to the foreigners. And at the same time, we are being wiped out. We don't populate like we used to. The homosexual agenda has got us in a twizzy. We really don't even like each other, to be honest. When you talked about Carthage and Hannibal and Carthage, one of the things that the Romans done was sold their land with salt, so nothing would ever grow again. The Southeast Corridor in America is probably the only last forest that we have. Looking at the mindset of the so-called African American, and you know what it is, we don't have to play with it. Aren't we just supposed to throw up our hands and just say, fuck it, let's get out of here? Because that looks like the way we're going.
Well, that is the mindset of the African American. That is the mindset of the so-called black person. And this message is going out to indigenous people. This message is going out to those people who are now awake. I have to backtrack on a word of mine, because there was one minister that did say something, and he said that he went to the mountaintop, and he looked over the mountain, and he did see the promised land. And he says, I know that one day, we are going to go into that promised land. So I'm telling you right now that I'm on top of that mountain. And I've started my assault down into that promised land. And I'm not going to let anyone on the face of this earth, because of what they're trying to do over there at CERN, what they're trying to do with all the stuff going on in space, what they're trying to do with all this stuff going on with this genetic manipulation, or anybody else's agenda. The prophecy has been made not only by Martin Luther King, but the prophecy was also made by another Indian nation. And that nation said that the black race is going to rise up and live again and take their place on this planet. So, my faith, not only in myself, but my faith in what God has put inside of me, and this carbon, this being that I am, I don't accept failure. I don't accept pulling back or retreating. And I'm not going to retreat. And I'm going to push on, whether I'm walking there by myself or I'm walking there with 1 billion people. I really don't care. I'm going to do what God has put inside of me and walk over into that promised land. We're going to get there. One way or the other, we're going to make sure that we're going to fulfill our purpose on this earth as the being that we're put here and meant to be. I am sick and tired of seeing black babies being killed out there in the street. I'm sick and tired of grown men bowing down and curtling themselves, watching their women being degraded and slapped all up and killed and mortified. I'm sick and tired of watching us begging other people in order for us to have something at a table that they gave us a seat at but no plates. Still eating the crumbs off their feet that they walked all over. The median income in this country still, many years after the Civil Rights Movement, is still far below of anyone else still coming into this country. That's going to change. Black-on-black crime is going to change. The way that we look at ourselves is going to change. And if you want to stay an African American and believe as though you want to run and tell and put your feet behind you, no. You go ahead and do that. I'm not trying to change that. But I believe that those people from the Olmecs, from the Zai, from any of these other races that we've come from, that blood, I believe that fervor that they left inside of us is a stamp and an imprint on each and every one of us. that is going to cause us to be able to succeed and the things that we're going to do. And so the first thing that we're going to do is bring our case to the world, to the whole entire world. And if the world denies our petition, which I don't believe they will, the world denies our petition, that becomes a whole nother ballgame. But at least, if you know, in the Bible, it says that Jesus said that when I come back, you're going to present yourself to me, and I'm not even going to know who you are. Well, look at us today. How many of these Indians or $5 Indians that have actually taken over the DNA genetics of the real Indians and put themselves in all these DOS rows? You guys know what the DOS rows are, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Screaming rows, right? They assumed our identity. They've taken our place. So when that was it, the Bible's a watered down version of the truth, is what I say. But if you read the Bible, and if you read it right, you can find out exactly what you're talking about, what you should be doing. So if he's coming back, and those people that are in the churches today that are praising his name, and he's going to say, "Get away from me, I don't know you." Well, the grand architects of this universe, if they do come back, and I believe they are, when they do come back, I want them to say, "At least you tried, brother. At least you tried.
At least you stood up."
That's right. And now the question is, are you going to choose life, or are you going to choose death? Are you going to choose a sellout, or are you going to choose freedom? And if those words of freedom coming off your mouth, then you better be willing to stand up for something. I ain't talking about marching all over the place as though you're lost in the wilderness. That fake story about them Jews was a lie too. You got yourself in the habit of marching. Now we going somewhere. Where the heck you going? You ain't going nowhere, except the only place that we can march right now is to the United Nations. And I agree with everything that you said. But this is where we got to start, and you got to start somewhere.
Well, let me ask you this. We're in the middle of the Olympics right now, and we're seeing the Indigenous Americans from America, and they're really kicking ass in it. And we're seeing the difference between the Africans. Now, don't get me wrong, Africans are getting dogged out like we get dogged out here. And my heart goes out to them. As a matter of fact, the Indigenous people here are always
You're broken again, bro.
The Africans
broken
here,
again, bro.
The people here are always in Africa's business trying to help Africans out. How are we going to get those people to help ourselves out here?
Well, let me tell you something, and again, I go back to the Bible, and the reason why I go back to the Bible, because it is a watered-down version of the truth. Not everybody's going to get saved. Not everybody's going to come. So, and you don't have to. See, because when it says that, my people that are called by my name, give up your wicked ways and turn to me and pray and repent. All we need to do is get back to our land. And those people that are there that are left, ain't got to be everybody, will then be able to turn themselves back into what they should be. So then that way they will be able to present themselves once again to the universe and be exactly who and what they are. The reason why you're saying, you know Superman. Superman was made by two Jewish people back in the 1930s. And they got that idea of Superman from Jesse Owens, when he was beating Hitler's men. But they couldn't put a black man up there as Superman. So what they did, they put a white man up there as Superman and put the Egyptian colors on him. That triangle that you see was actually a diamond pyramid. And that S that you see on his chest was not an S, it was a snake.
Yep.
And those colors, say again? And those colors were the colors from Egypt. It wasn't red, black, and green. Get away from that red, black, and green. They ain't got nothing to do with us. Got nothing to do with us. Those colors got nothing to do with us as a people whatsoever. And this man that they created absorbs what? He absorbs solar, sun. And what do black people do? What do we do? What do the indigenous people do? We absorb the sun. We create energy out of the sun in our system. We are the only race on the face of the earth that I know of that create vitamin D in our system. Everybody, vitamin D3. Everyone else has to be able to, you have to take it as a supplement. At least I know vitamin D. So when you're looking at that, you're looking at us as a race of people that belong taking care of the things on this earth. And this is why no matter where you may go, you'll stand out, because we are of the original blood and the original bloodline of what the Amen people, or what you call God, the grand architects of this universe, put here on earth. This is who we are. This is what we are, and we can't let it go.
Rick Moon, you had something you want to add?
I did have one little question, but it's kind of away from what we were talking about. But I did want to ask Mr. McLean, how have the Moors contributed to this genocide? I've heard things about them too, like treaties and stuff like that.
So one of the things that I want to say is that there's a lot of stuff about the Hebrews. We're Hebrews and we're Israelites and all that other type stuff, and we're Moors, and we come from Moor and all that other type stuff. I can understand how people can say that. We are people that have been assimilated with a lot of other designations because of the things that we went through. The Moors were over here from Spain. They were over here, and they were doing a lot of trade. The present day Moroccan, if you want to call them Moors, the present day Moroccans, I would consider them to be the Moors of old. You have to remember the Moors of old were seriously contaminated by the Muslims and that whole entire journey and war that they had over there, which enslaved a great deal of what we now call the African nation. So I want to really get into. I'm glad you asked that, because this is not a fight against any black race or any white race on the face of this earth. This isn't about racism. I say that again. This isn't about racism. This isn't about separation. This isn't about being separated from the white man. This is about saving a species of indigenous people that originally were from this side of the earth, that was trying, that certain people or certain governmental institutions tried to purposely wipe off the face of the earth. And that's what this whole entire thing is about. So if you believe that you're Moor, if you believe that you are a Hebrew, there's a lot of things that go along with that. But I'm not going to try to change anybody for what they are. And how did they contribute to the genocide? Again, you're talking about the modern day Moroccans, and those colors of their flag and all that other type stuff. I would hardly call them the Moors of old. The Moors of old are, one of the things before we get off, I want to tell people, take a look at original Indigenous Americans before 1492. Look at all the pictures and everything that they have. Look how proud they are. Also, go into Spain. Look at the Moors in Spain. Look how they dress. Look how they are. They are proud people. Look at the indigenous people of Europe, who ruled Europe for quite some time. and how they dressed and how rural they were and their governmental structures and all that other type stuff. We inherently are peaceful people. When the first Americans came over here on this side of the earth, this is what they said about the men. They treat the women well. They have great respect for the women. They have great respect for their friends' wives. There was no such thing as murder, and if it did happen, it happened in a very, very low state. There was no such thing as rape, thievery. They had and a lot of their things. They didn't have any words for those in their governmental law. Not at all. So, and when the people that came over here to try to harm them, they helped them. They helped them, and this is wide all across of the Americas. So, and this is the same vein that we have to begin to start living our lives again and getting back to, not people of war, but people of peace. Not people of hatred or trying to find hatred in everything. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why they hate, a lot of these Mongolian Indians, but that's just not who we are. We were put on this earth to be mature, respectful people, and to take care of everything else that is on this earth as well. That's what we're here for. That's why we were created. And in terms of us being Africans, the Africans are more tribal. That's the reason why you find them staying in singular places. We were not tribal. We migrated all across the earth and into the Americas. We created civilizations everywhere that we went. And it is my belief that we were the people that were chosen to go out and populate the stars. This is who we are as a people. This is who we need to get back to. We need to get back to our original purpose on earth.
All right.
So, I tell people, go out there and, learn your history. Go out there, learn how nations work. The pyramids were structured after the different levels of government in the Americas. And this is the reason why when they came over here, they tried to assimilate that type of government incorporated within the government that they have. Because if you study the American government, you know that Benjamin Franklin admittedly said that he got the system of government from the Indians. And those Indians got it from the people that were here, like the Olmecs, the Zai, who were here 16,000 years before them. And those people got it from the people who had cultivated this land for over 50,000 years.
Mr. McLean,
No kingships. Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Hi. This is Lucy Lachelle. I'm also part of the network, so I've been listening, and I was on the queue to call in, but I came in a little late. I'm enjoying everything, and I'm going to go back and listen to the recast of the show. What I want to ask is, with everything that's going on, and every time I read, from the different factions and groups, there are a lot of other groups that are wanting to petition the UN. How, if I might, how is that going to look when we have so many different petitions? On average, we have about 10% or so of things where we disagree in terms of, the various factions within our, within our greater collective. How can we, maybe try to come together for the greater good, fashion something that can be taken seriously, because we're all over the place, and you got all of these things coming to the UN, and they scoff at it, and nobody takes it seriously because of that. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that, you're exactly right. And the thing is that, when you begin to start hearing what people, the reason why it took me so long to do what I'm getting ready to do is because I had to back off. Why did I have to back off? Because I need to know that whatever I'm going to do has to be foolproof. has to be presented in a way where they can't say no. They can't say no. And it has to be representative not only of myself, but every single living and dead person has died in this long 500-year war. And this is why I say the United Front Line of the newly reestablished combined indigenous nations of North America. I'm not leaving anybody out. And nobody should be left out. And this petition, also the petition, it goes into, this is far more than what you would call reparations within inside of the United States, right? Because the main part of anything of people trying to be free, you have to have two things. And these two things will go into anywhere, you know, once it's granted to us. It goes into, you have to have your own land, and you have to control the economics of your land. We learned that from South Africa. In South Africa, they gave them their politics, but they kept the economics, and look at the people today, right? They have their politics, but they don't have the economics, right? We also learned through history that that a lot of leaders say that you know, you can build their war machines, but give me control of their money or their economics, and I'll control the whole damn thing. Excuse my language. So one of the things that, especially you know, it's the partitioning of the United States of America, and in particular region. And it's building a foolproof reason why the United States needs to be partitioned. Now, nobody's talking about partitioning the United States. And most of the people that you look at and that you hear, they're just trying to bring them up on some charges, or they're trying to, you know, say this, that, or the other thing. They ain't really asking for anything. They might be asking for some money. But money without land means nothing. Like, you think you own your home? I own my home. I own 3 homes. Sold them all, brought another one. I don't own them because I still have to pay taxes. I don't own my land, right? So, and demanding a petition in the same vein that they partitioned Palestine when most of the world was against it, and they got it passed. I believe that we're going to be able to partition the United States, and I believe through the power of our being, of just who we are, we're going to be able to do exactly what we need to do to have a land restored back to us, and give us the ability to have a right to self-determination. And then when you see all these people that have all these different political ideas, now they actually really have something to talk about. Once you're on your land, you can begin to start, that argument now really truly begins to start to take shape. Because now whatever you're talking about, you can actually do something about it. Because now you're developing your own system. And I believe that system needs to be part of the ancient system that they took us away from. And that's my belief. But, you know, we're living in a new world now. So we also are combined with a lot of other new different types of people, right? So we have to have an open heart and have an understanding that, you know, everybody means well, but we're all meaning to go to the same place. So, you know, my thing is, you know, I was taught in my business class, believe it or not, I read this book by Donald Trump, and he was like, you have to have a whole bunch of irons in the fire. Because if one of them gets hot, you're able to take that one, and you might be able to pull the rest of the hot irons along with you. So, you know, I'm not disagreeing with anybody in what they're doing. It's not even an argument for me, because I know that the most important thing that we have to have is land and control of our own economics.
Yes.
And that's and before we get off, to further go into your, I'm getting a little bit more into what I was opposed to, but I love my people, I love our people, and these are the things that I feel that we should be asking for, and that I am going to be asking for, and hopefully we'll be doing it in September. And I'm telling you now, the march ain't out there in the street. It's not out there with violence. It's not out there with any kind of killing of anybody, even though we're being slaughtered, and I know that. And that's hard for me to say. But we have to keep our focus. Our focus has to be what God has put into your heart, and that's freedom. Freedom for you, freedom for your children. If you're not free, your children aren't going to be free. And as a black man or an African American, a so-called African American, I call myself an Indigenous American. I have a right and a responsibility to take care of the land and the women that are on that land, to give them an opportunity to be fruitful. And this is what I think that we should be asking for, the right to be identified as Indigenous peoples of America. The reason why I say Indigenous is because it's a world legal term that can be legally justified and acted upon. The word Indian makes you a subjugation and a subject of the United States of America, like everybody became a subject of the United States of America when they began this, except the 14th, 15th, and 16th Amendment. For these charges to be heard by the world, the charges of genocide, the charges of human rights violation, the charges of violation of indigenous rights, and to be acted upon and to a positive conclusion. The carbonated / melanated, carpet-colored indigenous state declaration and petitioning demand to be accepted and acted on at once. The right for this nation to be separate and free from all aspects of the corporation of the United States and any authority of its claims to have over its slave population in the Americas and from its economic and governmental systems as we see fit. To be protected from all types of aggression leading to any type of harm, deprivation, disease, economic persecution, land infringement, and any type of war for 50 years. And the reason why I put that in there is because there is a United States resolution and declaration against weather wars on this earth, meaning that they can use HAARP and a lot of other things to control the weather in your area. This is one of the reasons why California is suffering such a horrible drought with no rain coming through.
I don't want you to the show to end without hopefully inviting you back. Again, this is Nisa Rochelle, aka the Mocha Masseuse, and I'm speaking on behalf of Buck, who's having some technical difficulties on his end. We bring these shows to everyone, do the best we can through the various mediums and means that we have, and of course we have these. You already know we have these technical difficulties, and we get kicked off, and you're doing what you should be doing when those things happen. I don't even have to say anymore. Okay.
That's right.
So he wanted me to let you know, that he was having some technical difficulties on his end, and he is in Nevada. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay.
We thank you so very much. We want you, hopefully, Buck will get a chance to talk to you again and have you on again, because this has been a very, very enlightening and insightful show. I mean, we can't tell you how much we appreciate it. Is there any information that you want to leave as we wrap it up? We got about inside of 3 minutes with, someone who might want to reach out and get in touch with you or something like that you'd like to share.
Yes, my main email is RonnieMcLeanSpeaks@gmail.com, and to begin to start supporting the efforts, September 1st.
Say that one more time. I didn't hear you myself. Say it one more time.
That's RonnieMcLeanSpeaks@gmail.com. I have the radio program Dark Matter with your host Ronnie McLean. It's also now on Blog Talk Radio, and you can catch that over there as well. My Facebook page is Ron McLean, and that's also associated with my Facebook business page, Dark Matter Radio. And September 1st, I'll have to be able to support some of the efforts that I'm going through, I'll have a book that's going to be out, Believe, For You Anything Is Possible. And I believe that. I believe that when this resolution is sent out to the world, it is going to be acted on. And it is going to change the nature of what people are fighting for, because they'll be fighting for true freedom, and they'll be fighting for their lives. They'll be fighting for the non-extinction of their own race. And it's been a pleasure being on with you. And I'm so glad and happy that we had this conversation and took the calls that we did. It is in my heart to love each and every one of you. Please be in peace. Please be careful. And just know, live your life with the affirmation that you can do anything that you put your mind to. And there is nothing that is impossible. And just remember, no matter what difficulties you might be facing today, that you're going to go through them. And when you come out on the other side, you're going to be much stronger.
Absolutely. In the native Choctaw, Yako, okay? Thank you. And as we wrap it up, one other thing, Mr. McLean, Buck said to call him at the end of the show. Please call him. And we want to say again, Yakeko, thank you. And Alito, Nayat, Achukuma. Good night. Until next week. Thank you on behalf of African Americans and African Network.
That's it. Yeah, you stop it now.